You're listening to Quorum Radio.
Okay. Well, basically, let's start with the shells that were found at the scene, because two different brands of shells were found at the scene by the witnesses. Okay, so Domingo Benavides, after he got out of the pickup truck, he basically got on the police radio, tried to report the shooting, didn't know how to work it, but anyway, he makes his way over to where he saw the gunman discard a couple of the shells, and he picks them up and he turns them over to the police. He gave them to Officer Joe Poe. And then Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis, they each found a shell. So there were 4 shells found at the scene. And the shells were, now when Oswald was arrested, obviously they took the revolver. They fired test shots, for ballistic purposes, and they compared the shells that were ejected from the test shots with the 4 shells found at the scene. And all 4 experts, Joseph Nickel, he was the superintendent of the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigations for the state of Illinois. And he basically said, along with the other experts, that the shells found at the scene were linked to the revolver taken from Oswald when he was arrested, to the exclusion of all other weapons in the world. And that would be Joseph Nickel, also Cortland Cunningham, Robert Frazier, and Charles Killian. Now, these guys worked for the Firearms Identification Unit of the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C. Now, all 4 of these experts, independent of each other, examined test cartridges ejected from, well, not ejected, but test cartridges removed from the revolver with the 4 shells found at the scene, and concluded that the 4 shells found at the scene were linked. They were fired from the revolver taken from Oswald, to the exclusion of any other weapon in the world.
Further clarification is, tell us about the gun that was found on Oswald's person, please.
Okay. Well, let me tell you this first. Let's start with this. So when fired, a gun puts a distinct fingerprint on the shell. Okay. The shell casing, it's up against the breech face and the firing pin. And when the hammer makes when the trigger is pulled, the hammer makes contact, with the primer, and the bullet is fired off, and the shell is thrown back against the breech face, and it places a distinct mark onto the base of the shell, and marks that were on the breech face. Now the marks on the breech face matching the marks on the shell proved that the shell casing was fired from that weapon. Okay, so it was that ballistic testing that Nickel, Cunningham, Frazier, and Killian were able to each examine. They each examined the shells found at the scene, along with shells removed from the revolver. Test bullets, test shots, and again they determined that the shells were linked through ballistics to the exclusion of every other weapon in the world. Now, as far as Oswald's revolver, now it was originally designed to fire 38 Smith and Wesson. However, it was rechambered to fire the 38 Special. Now, the 38 Special is a smaller bullet in diameter than the regular 38. Okay. Now, 5 lands and 5 grooves with a right twist. The barrel of the revolver that was taken from Oswald had 5 lands and 5 grooves with a right twist, and these are markings that are inside the barrel. Okay. And it was a 5-inch barrel, and it was shortened to 2 inches. And again, Joseph Nickel was able to take one of the bullets that was removed from Tippit's body, of the 4 bullets that hit Tippit, and Nickel was able to link one of those bullets. He said that one bullet had sufficient individual characteristics to conclude that it was fired from Oswald's revolver. Okay, all 4 bullets. They compared the shells that were ejected from the test shots with the 4 shells found at the scene, and all 4 experts, Joseph Nickel, he was the superintendent of the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigations for the state of Illinois, and he basically said, along with the other experts, that the shells found at the scene were linked to the revolver taken from Oswald when he was arrested, to the exclusion of all other weapons in the world. And that would be Joseph Nickel, also Cortland Cunningham, Robert Frazier, and Charles Killian. Now, these guys worked for the Firearms Identification Unit of the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C. Now, all 4 of these experts, independent of each other, examined test cartridges ejected from, well, not ejected, but test cartridges removed from the revolver with the 4 shells found at the scene, and concluded that the 4 shells found at the scene were linked. They were fired from the revolver taken from Oswald to the exclusion of any other weapon in the world.
Further clarification is, tell us about the gun that was found on Oswald's person, please.
Okay. Well, let me tell you this first. Let's start with this. So when fired, a gun puts a distinct fingerprint on the shell. Okay. The shell casing, it's up against the breech face and the firing pin. And when the hammer makes when the trigger is pulled, the hammer makes contact, with the primer, and the bullet is fired off, and the shell is thrown back against the breech face, and it places a distinct mark onto the base of the shell, and marks that were on the breech face. Now the marks on the breech face matching the marks on the shell proved that the shell casing was fired from that weapon. Okay. So it was that ballistic testing that Nickel, Cunningham, Frazier, and Killian were able to each examine. They each examined the shells found at the scene along with shells removed from the revolver. Test bullets, test shots, and again they determined that the shells were linked through ballistics to the exclusion of every other weapon in the world. Now, as far as Oswald's revolver, now it was originally designed to fire 38 Smith and Wesson. However, it was rechambered to fire the 38 Special. Now, the 38 Special is a smaller bullet in diameter than the regular 38. Okay. Now, 5 lands and 5 grooves with a right twist. The barrel of the revolver that was taken from Oswald had 5 lands and 5 grooves with a right twist, and these are markings that are inside the barrel. Okay. And it was a 5-inch barrel, and it was shortened to 2 inches. And again, Joseph Nickel was able to take one of the bullets that was removed from Tippett's body, of the 4 bullets that hit Tippit, and Nickel was able to link one of those bullets. He said that one bullet had sufficient individual characteristics to conclude that it was fired from Oswald's revolver. Okay, all 4 bullets and Oswald's revolver, they had the same characteristics: the 5 lands, the 5 grooves with the right twist. Bullets from Tippett's body also had similar scratches as test bullets fired from Oswald's revolver. Okay, and bullets from Tippett's body had signs of gas erosion. Now, gas erosion is caused when a propellant escapes between the surface of the bullet and the inside of the barrel. Now, this happens when the bullet that travels through the barrel is smaller than the barrel itself. And again, that goes back to what I said at the beginning, because the barrel was for a 38, but Oswald was shooting 38 Specials, which are smaller bullets. All right. So bullets,
by the way, the difference in terms of caliber, what might it be? 1/100th, 2/100th?
Well, you're talking about the 38, the regular 38 versus 38 Special?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a matter of a millimeter or two. But it's small enough. It made a difference, enough of a difference. The 38 Special was small enough where the propellant that escaped between the surface of the bullet and the inside of the barrel caused a gas erosion on the bullets that were removed from Tippett's body. Now, this would happen when you're firing 38 Special through a regular 38 barrel, if that makes sense.
No, sure. Absolutely. See, it's all consistent with the gun he has.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's also something important, and that's the shells that were found at the scene. Okay, so first of all 4 shells and all 4 bullets removed from Tippett's body were 38 Specials. Okay. The bullets that were removed from Tippett's body, he had 3 Winchester Western bullets and 1 Remington Peters bullet. Now, those were the 4 bullets removed from Tippit. Again, 3 Winchester Westerns and 1 Remington Peters. Now, the shells that were found at the scene, there is a little bit of a difference, because 2 of them were Winchester Westerns and 2 were Remington Peters. So, in other words, you have a mix and match of the brand of shells found at the scene compared to the brand of bullets removed from Tippett's body. Okay. again, the bullets were 3 Winchester Westerns and 1 Remington Peters, but the shells were 2 and 2. So Ted Calloway testified, well, basically that he heard 5 shots, okay? And it could be that Oswald fired 5 shots, not 4, but 1 bullet missed, and that bullet was never found, okay? Yeah. And also one of the shells that he discarded from the revolver would be somewhere between the patrol car and a block and a third away at Patton and Jefferson. One of the shells that he threw to the ground was never recovered. So the missing bullet could be a Remington Peters bullet, and the missing shell could be a Winchester Western.
Sure.
And if that's how it happened, well, now you have 3 Winchester Western bullets and 3 Winchester Western shells, and you have 2 Remington Peters bullets and 2 Remington Peters shells. So there could be a missing shell and a missing bullet. Okay. Now here's the interesting part too. When Oswald was arrested, Oswald had both Remington Peters and Winchester Westerns loaded into the revolver. There was 3 of each in the revolver. So is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that Oswald, when he's arrested, he's got 3 Remington Peters and 3 Winchester Westerns loaded in the revolver, and these are the same 2 brands of bullets that killed the police officer 7 blocks away? Is that a coincidence?
We put them together with all the other coincidences, and it's compelling regarding, pointing to who the person is that was the perpetrator. Now, the other question I want to ask, I'm glad you, Bill, one quick question about ammunition. Isn't it true that Oswald was found that like hours later he had a couple of bullets left in his pocket that they neglected to remove from his pockets? Right.
So what happened was Oswald had both brands on. Okay, so in the revolver again he had 3 Winchester Westerns and 3 Remington Peters, and then he also had so the gun was fully loaded with 6 live rounds. He also had 5 rounds. He had 5 bullets that were removed while he was in custody after a couple hours that were taken out of his pants pocket, his left front pants pocket. He literally had 5 live rounds that were taken from him while he was in custody. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, really. I mean, there's no significance other than just to shake your head in disbelief that he still had, 5 bullets in his pocket a couple hours later.
No, he was ready to roll.
Oh yeah, he was ready for shootout. Obviously when he went to the rooming house to grab his jacket, he most likely grabbed his revolver, and he probably they didn't find any live bullets among his possessions when they searched his belongings at the rooming house. So he obviously took all of the bullets he had that he could take with him, and he loaded the revolver and threw the rest of them in his left front pant pocket.
Right. So then we look at we bring things back to Johnny Calvin Brewer. He's in the shoe store. He sees a guy approach the foyer. He had seen him before in another date, looking for shoes. And, there's sirens, and there's this guy that just is calmly looking for shoes on the day the president gets shot. Sirens are going, just tremendous amount of police presence in the area. And then he's a little suspicious, and then he sees Oswald walk out. What happens after Oswald leaves the foyer? Why is it that Johnny Brewer follows him?
Well, after Oswald left the shoe store and made his way back out to the sidewalk and continued walking west of the theater, well, I guess Brewer followed him because he wanted to try to figure out, Brewer said that he looked, shaken up, looked scared. And in Brewer's opinion, he was obviously trying to avoid being seen by the police officers that were driving up and down, Jefferson with the sirens blaring. And Brewer, by this time, already knew of the assassination of the president. I'm not sure that it was broadcast yet on the radio that there was a police officer shot. So I don't know that Brewer really knew about a police officer being shot yet, but he knew about the assassination.
Actually, wait a minute. Parenthetical statement. I think I heard that he was listening to it on the radio. He had a radio, and then I think he had. Yeah,
he said that he heard on the radio of the officer being shot, but I don't think that a broadcast was put out at that time yet. I think he's misremembering that. I think it's an honest mistake, but I don't believe at that early point that a police officer being shot was put out over the radio, the public radio.
Seems like it might have been a little premature, but then again, the shooting of the president, that was all over the place. No?
Exactly. So at the very minimum, Johnny Brewer is aware that the president's been assassinated, or at least shot at. I don't think they even knew he was dead yet, but at the very minimum, Johnny Brewer knew that that there was an assassination attempt, and that the president was at Parkland Hospital. And then you got this guy ducking into your recessed entrance of the shoe store, avoiding police cars. So that's obviously why Johnny Brewer decided to follow him to the theater. And Brewer goes up to Julia Postal, and he says, "Hey, did you sell that man a ticket?" And she says, "No." And a lot of conspiracy theorists will say, well, why would he ask her that if he watched the guy sneak in? Why would he go up and ask her? Well, Johnny Brewer actually gave he talked to for the oral history of the Sixth Floor Museum, and he specifically addressed that. He said, I knew he didn't buy a ticket, but I just wanted to get it set in my mind that he didn't buy the ticket. So it's almost like, did he really do that? But before we get to the Texas Theater, there's a number of things, though, that we haven't really discussed regarding the Tippit shooting. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of them is the timing dispute, which is probably the single most important thing to discuss when it comes to the Tippit shooting. You know how conspiracy theorists will claim that Oswald couldn't have got to the shooting scene in time, to shoot Tippit. You've heard that, I'm sure, right?
Sure, absolutely. Oh, that's constantly brought up.
Okay.
I always look at that with a lot of sense of disagreement. I don't buy that.
Yeah. Well, the problem begins when T.F. Boley was a fellow who pulled up on the scene, the Tippit shooting scene, and he said that when he pulled up on the scene, he started to get out of his car and he glanced down at his watch, and his watch said 1:10. And then he gets out and he goes over to the body. He looks down and he realizes there's nothing he can do. Obviously, Tippit's got a gunshot wound to the head and he's bleeding from the head. So Boley goes over to the police radio and he grabs the mic from Domingo Benavides, who's still trying to work the radio, because Benavides, when he got out of his pickup truck, he went over to the radio and he tried to report the shooting. And when you listen to the real police tapes, you can hear Benavides key the mic for about a minute and a half, around 1:15, 1:16. And he's never able to work it right. So Bally grabs the mic from Benavides, and it's that report by Bally, the famous report that you hear when you listen to the police tapes. "Hello, police operator, there's been a shooting out here. It's a police officer, somebody shot him," that kind of thing. And this report is made at 1:17, okay? Now, here's the thing. So if T.F. Bally's watch was correct, that he put up on the scene and his watch read 1:10 and Tippit's already lying in the street dying, then that means obviously that Tippit was shot before 1:10. Well, if Tippit's shot before 1:10, then Oswald couldn't have got there in time if he left his rooming house at 1:02, 1:03, 1:04. He left the bus stop and starts walking. He can't make it there in 6, 7, 8 minutes. It takes at least 11 minutes anyway. But here's the thing regarding...
Keep in mind something, and that is that Whaley picks him up, and Oswald's out of there fast from the book depository. Whaley picks him up after he's been on the bus maybe a minute or so, who knows. I mean, he realizes if Oswald is the assailant, he's very conscious of how vulnerable he is, that he could be apprehended at any moment. And for him, even a minute or 30 seconds when he's realizing traffic is all backed up, that gives him a lot of motive to get the heck out of there. He's cornered. So I would think that he probably as soon as he could, he got off that bus. Who knows how long? I don't know what they say in terms of time, how long, how many seconds or minutes he was on that bus, but he gets off, gets into the taxi quick. And, there are parts of the city where traffic wasn't so bad, but so he gets there. What's that?
They went across the Houston Street Viaduct. When Oswald got in Whaley's cab, they didn't go anywhere near Dilley Plaza.
Let me ask you a question. What did Whaley say about, assuming he was questioned, about how heavy the traffic was?
Well, actually, the Warren Commission, it's either the Warren Commission or the FBI actually retraced the movements from picking up his famous passenger near the Greyhound to dropping him off at the 700 block of North Beckley. And, they did this timing reenactment because they were trying to determine how long it would have taken Oswald to get to the rooming house. because they're trying to make sure they're trying to see exactly when Oswald walks into the rooming house. Again, early Robert said it was around 1 o'clock, but again, it could be 12:56, could be 1:04. But
Yeah.
what I wanted to say, so as far as getting back to the TF Bally, though, this is the guy who said his watch said 110 when he pulled up on the scene. Here's the thing. So Ted Calloway, again, he's on Patton. He heard 5 shots. He ran to the sidewalk on Patton. He saw Oswald cross Patton as he made his way south on Patton. Calloway hollered at Oswald, hey, man, what the hell's going on? And he testified that Oswald was running and holding a gun. Calloway saw Oswald head west on Jefferson. So Calloway then ran, in his words, a good hard run up to the corner at 10th and Patton. And that's when he noticed, because at the time he didn't know what happened up there. He just heard the gunshots. So he makes a good hard run up to the corner at 10th and Patton. He noticed the patrol car. He goes over to the patrol car, and he sees Tippit lying dead in the street. So to recap here, he hears the shots, and by he, I'm saying Calloway. He hears the shots. He runs out to the sidewalk on Patton. He watches the gunman run south on Patton. He sees the gunman head west on Jefferson. He runs 2/3 of a block up to the scene, and then he reports the shooting to the dispatcher. Now, Ted Calloway got on the patrol car, the police radio, to report the shooting because he didn't know if somebody else had already done it. Well, TF Bally had already done it, but Calloway didn't know that, okay? So how much time passes? How much time passes from the time that Calloway heard the shots to the time that he reports the shooting on the police radio? So let's say 2 minutes pass from the time that Oswald shoots Tippit to the time that Oswald turns the corner from Patton onto Jefferson. That's a little over a block, and Oswald was running. Now let's say it takes Calloway 1 minute to make his good hard run from his spot on the sidewalk up to the patrol car. Now, if these estimates are accurate, Calloway is at the patrol car 3 minutes after the shots rang out. So let's add 1 minute for error, and we have Calloway at the patrol car using the police radio 4 minutes after the shots, okay? Now, here's the thing. Calloway's report to the police dispatcher using the patrol car radio, it took place 119 to 120.
Okay.
Okay, so what that tells you is for TF Boley to arrive before 110, and Boley is the one who made the report over the police radio at 117. 7 minutes would have to believe it really was 110 when Boley put up on the scene versus simply that his watch was incorrect. 7 minutes would have to pass between the time Boley arrived and then the time Boley got on the police radio to report the shooting. Okay, and if you listen to Boley's own words, he tells you what he did. He pulled up, he got out, walked over to the patrol car, looked down at the officer, realized there's nothing he can do, goes over to the patrol car, takes the mic from Benavides, who couldn't work it right, and he reports the shooting at 117. How does he arrive at 110? If his actions, he tells you what he did. You can read his affidavit. His actions take a minute and a half at the most. He didn't arrive before 110 is my point. And Calloway, I just told you everything that Calloway said he did. And if Calloway is the second citizen to report the shooting on the police radio, 119 to 120, and Calloway, his actions only took him 4 or 5 minutes, which again takes you to hearing the shots right around 115. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, sure. So what's more accurate, or what's more believable, that T.F. Boley really did arrive at 110 per his 1963 era wind-up wristwatch, and then it somehow or another took him 7 minutes to exit his car, walk over to Tippit's body, and look down at the body, continue to walk to the door of the patrol car, take the mic from Benavides, and report the shooting at 117. Did that really take 7 minutes? Or is it more likely that Boley's 1963 era wind-up wristwatch was simply incorrect?
Did they ever make any attempts to ascertain how accurate his watch was? Did that happen, or did that? No. Was that a?
Boley never testified to the Warren Commission because he didn't see the shooting and he didn't see the suspect fleeing the scene, so he never testified to the Warren Commission.
And whether they tried to ascertain its accuracy?
Yeah, T.F. Boley never testified to the Warren Commission because he didn't see the shooting, he didn't see the suspect fleeing, So he was never called to testify before the Warren Commission.
Right. Okay.
He was interviewed by the FBI. He gave an affidavit, and in the affidavit, that's when he says that he looked at his watch and his watch read 1:10.
Right. Okay.
But
Sure.
my point is, for his watch to be accurate, for him to arrive at 1:10, it means that it would have taken him 7 minutes to leave his car, walk over to the body, look down at the body, realize there's nothing he can do for the officer, then walk over to the door, grab the mic from Benavides, and report the shooting, which he did at 1:17. That wouldn't take 7 minutes. It'd take a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And that's being generous. Could take 45 seconds.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Point being, his watch had to be off because there's no way that would have taken him 7 minutes to do that.
Right. And you also have to say, it goes back to another issue, and that is the time that was registered on the recording. This was, at that time, I guess they had reel-to-reel recorders recording radio traffic
Right.
between headquarters and the police
Right.
patrol cars, right? So that could have been off a minute or two. I mean, give or take. I mean, people have to understand that things were not quite as, even today, things are not 100% perfect. You have differences,
Exactly.
The time that somebody looks at somebody programs it and they look at their watch, and the watch could be off 2 minutes, or a minute and a half.
Right.
So there's what's important, I think, to keep in mind is the people looking at this event unfold, they're watching it, they're seeing the same thing, they're seeing pretty much the same garments, and maybe a rough description. Some people can positively identify him, others maybe not. But we then go to the point where the suspect goes to the movie theater. Take us back to that point and explain what happened.
Actually, can I make one more point about the timing dispute first? There's one more thing I want to say about the timing dispute first.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So you have, Mary Wright. She was in the same. Okay, if you remember earlier, I told you about Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith.
Yes.
They were in the front yard of Block
Yeah.
East. Okay, so that was a duplex, and there was a couple that also lived in the house named Frank and Mary Wright. Now, Mary Wright, when she heard the shots, she called the police immediately. She told this to George and Patricia Nash when she was interviewed in the 60s. Now, Barbara Davis was in the house at the corner of 10th and Patton. Well, she heard the shots, went to her door, saw the man walking across her yard, unloading a gun. She heard Markham screaming. She saw the police car, and she immediately went inside and called the operator to report the shooting to the police. That was her affidavit from November 22nd, 1963. Now, L.J. Lewis, he's one of the four guys at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, which is one block south of the shooting scene. He heard the shots, and he, along with the other three fellows at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, they saw the gunman running south on Patton toward their direction. Well, L.J. Lewis, he went inside and called the police. So you have Mary Wright, Barbara Davis, and L.J. Lewis all calling the police. Mary Wright says she called the police immediately. Barbara Davis called the police, her words, basically immediately after the gunman cut across her yard. And then L.J. Lewis called the police once the man was running down Patton and turned onto Jefferson. Now, here's the thing, though. Murray Jackson was the dispatcher, and he received the alert from the, quote, citizen using the police radio at 1:16. So T.F. Boley, according to the police tapes, now Dale Myers actually reenacted it and more accurately and concluded that the call was placed by T.F. Boley at 1:17. But whether it's 1:16 or 1:17, Murray Jackson received the call from T.F. Boley and was told that a policeman had been shot. Murray Jackson asked him where, and Boley tells him, basically gives him three streets, on 10th Street between Marcellus and Beckley. So immediately, Murray Jackson instantly calls out, and you can hear this on the police tapes, for 78. Well, 78 was Tippett's call number. Okay, that was his patrol district. His call number was 78. So Jackson is then informed that it's car number 10, and what does Jackson do? He calls out for 78 two more times. All this can be heard on the police tapes. So since we know that Mary Wright and Barbara Davis and L.J. Lewis called the police almost immediately, and we know that Murray Jackson was unaware of the shooting until he received the alert from the citizen using the police radio, the Tippett's patrol car radio, it's obvious that Wright, Davis, and Lewis phoned in the shooting at a point in time just before T.F. Boley did on the police radio. Otherwise, Jackson had been already made aware of it by the time Boley used the police radio.
Right.
Okay.
Did they register a time? Did they register
What's that?
time when those citizens called the police to report?
Yeah, I have not seen any records of when those calls came in. Okay, but if these three witnesses had phoned in the shooting much earlier, then Jackson would have already been made aware of the shooting by the time that T.F. Boley contacted Jackson on the police radio. Do you understand?
Right. Yeah.
And so the point is that Murray Jackson, the dispatcher, when he hears from T.F. Boley of the shooting of a police officer on 10th Street between Marcellus and Beckley, well, Murray Jackson knows that that's where he sent Tippit to right after the assassination. That vicinity. So
Sure.
because we hear the police tapes, we hear Murray Jackson called out for 78 3 times. That tells us that Murray Jackson had not been made aware of any citizen calling in the operator, because what happens is when a citizen calls in the operator transfers them to the police. They report a shooting of a police officer out in the street. The lady at the police department sends a note down a conveyor belt that makes its way to the police dispatcher, Murray Jackson, who then puts out basically a report to all the police officers on the police radio. Hey, there's been a shooting at blah, blah, blah. You see, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Murray Jackson hadn't done that yet. So when he received the notification from T.F. Boley on the police radio, he was not aware yet of the shooting by any of those three people who actually called the police on the telephone. All right.
That would have required somebody filling out a slip, putting it on the conveyor belt and all that, but which eventually happened, right?
Yeah, that did happen. And as a matter of fact, Murray Jackson actually said that just as he was receiving the notification from the citizen using the police radio, which again we know is T.F. Boley, that's at the same time that little slip was coming down the conveyor belt to him. All right. But if Boley, the bottom line is, if Boley would have waited a good amount of time before reporting the shooting, in other words, he arrives at 1:10 but doesn't report it until 1:17, then Murray Jackson would have already received notification from these citizens that phoned in the shooting. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The simple fact that Murray Jackson was unaware of the shooting means that, when Boley reported on the police radio, tells you that the shooting did not occur before 1:10. The shooting had just recently occurred because these three witnesses, Mary Wright, Barbara Davis, and O.J. Lewis, they called the police almost immediately.
Yeah, they didn't.
That's important.
Sure.
That's important to understand, that they called the police almost immediately, and yet when Murray Jackson hears from T.F. Boley on the police radio, Jackson doesn't know about the shooting yet. T.F. Boley is the one that first makes Murray Jackson aware of the shooting.
Right. And just wondering, just not to be too precise here, but I wonder generally how much time would elapse between a citizen phoning in a crime, especially of that magnitude, and the receptionist or the person there at the headquarters, or where they receive notifications, writing up a piece of paper, and I wonder how long it would take.
Unless you believe that would take 6 or 7 minutes, then it doesn't make sense that T.F. Boley arrived at 1:10.
Something like that would be, I would say, would be immediate.
Yeah, it'd be immediate. It'd be like, what, 30 seconds, 45 seconds at the most?
35, 45 seconds.
Exactly. So, in other words, the Dallas police tapes tell you that T.F. Boley did not arrive at 1:10, despite what his watch said.